My name is Addison Benz, and I am currently a commercial pilot working on my CFI, and I also have my instrument rating. I'm starting this YouTube series to help y'all and to help me. I started out with a TikTok account where I'd make about 5-minute long videos teaching different topics of aviation. One, to help myself, because teaching things back to people really helps you retain the information. It helps you to learn further. And also people who watch my videos loved them and would always comment, ask me to make videos on different topics. So I did that, and then my TikTok account got hacked. So I have an Instagram account that I'm starting, and then I just thought that what better time would there be for me to start a YouTube also, because I've been wanting to do this. And truly, YouTube videos have saved me during my pilot training, whether that's because I'm studying on my own and I just can't grasp the topic. Watching a YouTube video and seeing visuals or seeing someone explain it a different way than how your instructor is explaining it can really be helpful, and YouTube videos are truly what I relied on and leaned on during my training journey. So since I am in training to become a CFI, I thought that making YouTube videos, teaching each lesson to y'all will help me remember the information for my check ride, and also help me to get better at teaching and explaining things for my CFI journey. And also when I get students, if they have questions on certain topics and I'm just like not explaining it well, or we don't have enough time during our lesson, they can go on to my YouTube and watch it, and then they're not getting charged, which that might bite me in the butt one day because I probably need the money. But yeah, this is my first video. It's only going to be private pilot stuff, just because honestly I don't think I'll have enough time to go through all the commercial stuff as well, even though I know that'll be on my check ride. I plan on taking my check ride July 3rd. We haven't booked it yet, but I need to talk to my instructor and then get back to the DPE. But yeah, we have a month, so I plan on doing these videos 3 times a week so I can at least get like 12 lesson plans in for y'all and for me. Because there's a lot of information you need to know for CFI. Like, you have to remember everything that you ever learned, and I thought this would be the best way to kind of go through all the information. Okay, so in this first lesson, we're going to be doing aerodynamics, which you should know this before you even step in a plane. I think it's important to know how the plane is flying and why certain things happen with the plane. Just to know the basics before you even step in a plane. So I definitely will be teaching all of this to my students before they even step foot in a plane. Discovery flight is different, but these are the things that we're going to go over regarding aerodynamics. So the 4 forces of flight, angle of attack, airfoils producing lift, why the wings stall, left turning tendencies, stability and impact of the center of gravity, load factor, and wake turbulence avoidance. Now, all of these kind of tie in together and they kind of go off of each other, so I'm not going to do things based on each section. Those are just the things that we're going to go over that are the most important, but it's all just going to kind of flow together. So I'm just going to start off with the 4 forces, which we have 4 of them: thrust, drag, lift, and weight. All of these have to be equal to each other for us to fly in straight and level flight. So what I mean by that is thrust has to equal drag and lift has to equal weight. So thrust is obviously us moving forward. So when we apply power to the plane and we start moving forward, drag is the rearward motion. Every time that you have lift, you're going to have drag. So it's inevitable, we're going to have it. There's 2 types of drag. We'll get into that next. Lift is the upward motion, climbing, and then weight is just our weight and gravity pulling us back to the earth. To be in equilibrium, the thrust has to equal the drag and the lift has to equal the weight for us to be in straight and level flight. In a climb, obviously, our lift and our thrust has to be greater than our drag and our weight. And out of all of these, I feel like the one that gets the most confusing is drag, especially since there's so many different types of drag that we're going to go over. But everyone has experienced drag before. Any object that's moving forward has drag. So if you put your hand out the car window when you're moving, you can feel your hand move backwards. That's drag. So it's easier than what we make it out to be. So since we kind of started talking about climbs and descents, I'm just going to kind of explain airspeeds with climbs and descents. So since we just talked about climbs and descents a little bit, I'm just going to kind of go further into that. So if we are in a climb, we're going to have more power than what we do for cruise flight. So cruise flight, you're going to have the power set at like 2400, whatever. If you're climbing, you're going to want to do full power. So we're going to have more thrust, and then in turn, we're going to have more lift because the nose is going to want to naturally pitch up. Whenever the nose pitches up, our airspeed slows down. So it gets kind of confusing because you feel like if you're climbing, your power is higher, you feel like your airspeed would be higher, but nose pitched up means we're having a slower airspeed. If our nose is pitched down, we're having a faster airspeed. If our nose is pitched down and we're descending, there's more air that's coming over the wings, which in turn makes us have more airspeed. This may seem confusing and like a lot, but we're going to get into it. So climbing, we have a slower airspeed. And if we're descending, it's faster. Again, confusing because we're going to end up pulling our RPMs back when we descend, because we know that when we pull the power back, our plane is going to pitch down into a descent. The air is going to move faster over our wings, giving us a faster airspeed. And if we left the power in that we were using for cruise flight, it would make our airspeed get really fast and it would overspeed the plane. So we don't want that to happen. So we pull the power in advance so that to make up for the air that's coming over the wings really fast and making our airspeed get faster. Basically what I'm saying here is that the RPMs have nothing to do with our airspeed, because as I just explained, when we're in a descent, our RPMs tend to be lower, but our airspeed ends up being faster. And then as we are in a climb, our RPMs are higher, but our airspeed tends to be slower. So the airspeed is dependent upon the pitch of the airplane and the pitch at which it is flying through the air. So our airfoils are one of the most important parts of lift. They contribute to our lift because of the air moving over the airfoil. Airfoils is just basically your wings. And like we said, any lift that we get, we're also going to get drag. So airfoils also contribute to our drag, as they do contribute to our lift. So the type of drag that always comes from lift is our induced drag. There's also a drag called parasite drag. We'll get into that, but induced drag always comes from lift. And with induced drag, we won't really go into it any further because it's just always going to be there. It just happens. It's the byproduct of lift. So when we have lift, we're just going to have induced drag. The other type of drag is called parasite drag, and there are 3 types of it. So the 3 types of parasite drag are form, interference, and skin friction. So form is just as it sounds. It is the shape of the object. So the shape of the plane is causing drag. So if you think about it, we have our wings that are producing lift, but we have all the little things, like we have the landing gear underneath that's causing drag just from the shape of it. Pretty self-explanatory with that one. Interference drag comes from air coming off 2 different surfaces on the plane. So basically, I'm just going to draw the best plane I can do. That's the cockpit and that's the wings. But so we have wind that's coming off of our wings. There's wind coming off of our landing gear. So as this air comes off, this air and this air could meet together, and the interference of the wind meeting together, or the air meeting together, is going to cause interference drag. Then we get into skin friction drag, which is literally just the texture or the surface of the airplane. So as the air goes over the wings, there's texture on the wings, and that little bit of surface is going to cause skin friction drag. That one's pretty self-explanatory too. Don't make these more confusing than they need to be. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory if you just take a second to think about it, like skin friction, like what could that possibly be? And you could probably figure it out. So since we're talking about air moving over the surface of our airfoils or our wings, we're just going to go ahead and start talking about how the airfoils produce lift, because the air that moves over the airfoils has a lot to do with how we get lift. So this is going to be my airfoil. Don't judge my drawing. That is what our wing looks like from, if we were looking at it from the side. So if we were standing all the way on the end of the wing, this is what it would look like. This is our trailing edge. This is our leading edge. This is our camber line, which follows the curvature of the wing. And then we also have our cord line, which connects the leading edge to the trailing edge. And our cord line is going to be really important. Then we get lift, then our weight, our drag, thrust, then our relative wind, which is also a really important thing, is going to move this way because obviously as we move through the air this way, our relative wind that's hitting the plane is going to be coming at us in the opposite direction. And why our relative wind and our cord line are really important is because the angle between the relative wind and the cord line is what gives us our angle of attack. Basically, our angle of attack is the angle at which we are moving through the air that we are flying at. So this relative wind, let's just say that is our relative wind and our cord line. This angle that we have here is our angle of attack. Now we're going to talk about stalls next, but I just want to point out angle of attack is the most important thing when it comes to stalls. Stalls have nothing to do with our airspeed, and you'll learn that through your training, that the plane can stall at any airspeed, but it'll always stall at the same angle of attack. So that is our airfoil, and that is all the parts of our airfoil. So now we're going to talk about how it actually creates our lift. So I'm going to draw, this is my plane again, don't judge me. This is the cockpit, the landing gear, those are the wings. So it's a Cessna. First we want to understand is that air is a fluid, and air has mass and pressure, which is all going to contribute to how our airfoils are producing lift as they're moving through the air. So basically there's two things that can contribute to our lift. One is a pressure differential, and one is air being deflected downwards. We're going to start with Newton's third law, which you've probably learned in school. But basically Newton's third law is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So this is going to tie into the air being deflected downward. So basically, as we're flying through the air, we have wind that is going over our wings. We can kind of draw up here from this angle too. So the wind is just moving across our wings, and the wind stays attached to the wings the whole time it's moving over it. So it's just going right over the wings, but then as it gets to our trailing edge, it has to disconnect. So it disconnects and it's just going to move downwards. So we have this air that's moving downwards towards the ground. So for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So that air is going to come back up and push us up to keep us lifted, if that makes sense. Basically, all you need to know is that there's a downward force coming off the wings. As the wind comes off the wings, it's going towards the ground, and there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. So there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction of air coming up. So that is our air being deflected downwards. Our other one, so I'm just going to write that up here because these are really important for you to know. So our other reason for lift being created is Bernoulli's principle. As the air moves over our wing, so this is our wind that's coming over our wing right here, it's going to speed up as it moves over the wing. And as it speeds up, it creates a low pressure up top of the wing, and it creates a high pressure underneath. Air is moving over the wing, it's moving really fast, and then it's circulating, and it's creating this high pressure underneath and this low pressure up top. That pressure differential is going to allow the wing to stay lifted in the air because you have that high pressure underneath that's causing the wing to stay in the air, and since there's a low pressure up top, it's easier for that high pressure to hold the wing up, if that makes sense. That's pretty base level. I'm just doing all the base level stuff. This is so that you guys can watch this, understand the basics, and if there's something you want to learn further or just dive deeper into, you can schedule grounds with your instructor or look at more YouTube videos. Now that we've gone over lift and how the wind is moving over the wings and how that all ties in to us flying in the air, we're going to talk about vortices, because this is a byproduct of the wind moving over our wings and air coming off the backside. So these are our wings, this is the cockpit. So as we're flying through the air, we talked about the wind that's going over the wings, so obviously it's going to move in this direction off of our wings. Basically, lift creates vortices because of the wind moving over our wings, and what vortices are is circling air. So it creates a spiral of air that's coming off of our wings. And the vortices move outwards and downwards. So the air is moving this way, and it's trailing behind our wings. So that's all that I'm going to say about vortices for now, but vortices do happen the most when the aircraft is heavy, clean, and slow. So obviously heavy is pretty self-explanatory. Clean means we have flaps up, landing gear up, and then slow, we're just flying at a super slow airspeed. Maybe they're coming into land, flying really slow. So these vortices of air we call wake turbulence. So just like if you were in a boat and you're falling behind another boat, they have wake coming off of their boat and you're going to hit that wake and it's going to be bumpy. Same thing happens in the sky. If you fly in the path of that wind from that plane in front of you, you're going to feel bumpiness, turbulence, because it's the wake off the airplane. So it's called wake turbulence. That comes from the vortices. And the wake turbulence happens when the plane is heavy, clean, and slow. Happens the most when the plane is heavy, clean, and slow. And the way we avoid wake turbulence is, say we're coming in on final, we're following a plane into land, they're flying in front of us, and this is us. The vortices come off and they sink to the ground. So what you want to do is stay above the plane, because if you stay above, you're not going to hit that because it's sinking. If you are underneath the plane, all of that's just coming down to you. So you want to stay above the plane, and then whenever they touch down on the runway, you're going to want to fly and touch down past them. Obviously, once they're off the runway, but just keep in mind kind of where they touch down at, and then touch down in front of them. That way you're constantly staying above their flight path and you're never going to hit their wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is not the end of the world. Like, you hit it when you're doing maneuvers, you might hit some of your own wake turbulence. If you're doing turns, you might turn around and come and hit your own wake turbulence. It's not the end of the world, it's just turbulence. And if we can avoid it, we should try to. So now we're going to get into stalls, which stalls are actually my favorite thing to explain to someone or teach, because honestly, it took me forever to understand what a stall was and why it was happening, because I felt like the first person who taught it to me taught it to me in a way that wasn't actually really correct, and so then I had to like backtrack and relearn it. So now I really understand it. Basically, a stall is related to our angle of attack. So basically, when you think of a stall, you might think of an engine stalling, something like that, but in aviation and with airplanes, it's actually the wing stalling. The wind is going over our wing and it's staying connected the whole time, and that is how we produce lift, because then once it gets to the trailing edge, it has that equal and opposite reaction, and then once it goes over the whole wing, it speeds up, then it creates our high and low pressure. So it's really important that our wind stays attached to our wing at all times. So our angle of attack is really important because it is the angle between the chord line and our relative wind. So there's no way for us inside the plane to see our angle of attack. There's no gauge that tells us this is what your angle of attack is right now. There's some planes I believe that do have that, but obviously the ones we're flying in don't. We do have an airspeed indicator, and obviously we have a stall speed for each plane. So say our stall speed is 50 in our plane. So when we're flying, if we pitch that nose up so that our airspeed indicator is showing 50, we know that we're probably getting close to stalling. But it's not always true, just because different phases of flight cause different airspeeds. I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself and getting confusing, so I'm going to go back to this. But basically, our airspeed has something to do with our stall. So we could stall at 60, we could stall at 45. So we don't really want to rely on that completely. Our angle of attack is what it's all based on. So we have this angle, we're flying through the air. Whenever our airplane exceeds the critical angle of attack, that is when we're going to stall. So what happens when we exceed the critical angle of attack? Our wind is separating from our wing. So, like I said, our wind needs to be connected to our wing at all times for us to have lift. So what happens is our critical angle of attack is exceeded, and this is our wind connected, and all of a sudden it just disconnects because it can no longer connect to the wing. So our wind is going over the wing, it's connected, and then all of a sudden it just breaks off. If we don't have that wind connecting, we're not going to have the equal and opposite reaction, we're not going to have the high and low pressure, we're not going to have lift. So at this point, our wings are stalled. They're no longer producing lift, and our nose is going to go down because there's nothing to keep us up and lifted. Now, you're going to practice stalls in training. They're not as scary as you think they are. If you got into a real situation where you're like about to land and you stall your wings, that's scary. But in training, you're going to be very high up, have tons of time to recover and to really practice them. Very important that you practice them. But they're not as scary as we think. And to rebuild that lift, we're going to have to break the stall by pushing the nose down and reconnect the wind to our wing. So doing that, you're going to push the nose down and allow the airspeed to rebuild as the wind is connecting and regaining momentum. Your lift is going to be recreated, and then you're able to pick your nose up to straight level flight and kind of climb out of that situation. That's all that I'm going to say about stalls. That's pretty basic. You could dive into it way deeper than that, but I feel like that's a good base before you go up there and fly a plane. Okay, so now we're going to talk about static stability really quick. I don't want to go too much into stability. This is actually really simple. It, for some reason, confused me a lot in the beginning, but I'm just going to explain it to you in the most basic way, and you guys are going to think it's the easiest thing ever. So basically, with stability, we have three types. We have positive, negative, and neutral. So basically, say we have the plane trimmed out for straight and level flight. We're just flying straight and level. It's trimmed out. The power's set perfectly. And say that we push on the yoke to make the plane's nose go downward. Positive static stability would be the airplane brings the nose back up and continues flying in straight and level. A neutral static stability would be we push the nose down and the plane continues to fly in that nose down attitude that we put it in. And a negative static stability, which would be the worst case scenario, is we push the plane down to be in a nose down attitude, and it goes even further into a nose down attitude. Instead of coming back up to its original state, or instead of just staying where we put it at, it continues to go further into a nose down attitude. Okay, very briefly, we're going to get into center of gravity, which you're going to go into this a lot more once you start talking about weight and balance, but we're just going to dive into it a little bit. So you'll often see it as COG, that is our center of gravity. Our airplane, our center of gravity is the point on the airplane at which it is balanced. So our center of gravity is always going to be ahead of our center of lift, which you'll learn more about that later. Our CG can either be aft or fore. So if our CG is 4, it's going to be further towards the nose of the airplane. So let's just put nose, and this is our tail. If it's aft, then it's going to be closer to the tail of the airplane. Where our center of gravity is located at on the plane, it contributes to different characteristics of how the plane flies. So basically, if we have a 4 CG, that means that more weight is going to be up here at the front, which means our nose is going to be heavier, wanting to pitch down. This is the cap of the marker is the front of the plane, and this is the tail of the plane. So if we have 4 CG, it's going to make our nose heavy. So this is how the plane naturally is. Let's just say it's just heavier this way. It's going to want to make the nose fall, which means we're going to have to overcompensate by flying up. We're not actually going to be flying through the air like this, but we're going to have to overcompensate so that our plane actually flies like this instead of like that. I'm just going to touch on some of the principles of flight that happen with a 4 or an aft CG. So if we're flying like this, we're going to have a worse fuel economy just because we are using more fuel because we're kind of flying upwards to just go straight. And we're more prone to stalling because we're already pitched up at this attitude. And as we know, when we pitch up too much and exceed our critical angle of attack, that's when we stall. So since we're already flying like this, if we pitch up just a little bit too far, we could end up stalling. The good thing is if we did stall, since the plane nose is heavy, we're gonna naturally go into an attitude like this, and it's gonna be easier to recover from the stall because then our wind is going to go over our wings and we're gonna reproduce our lift. Now let's talk about an aft CG, which means that the plane is heavier towards the tail. So having an aft CG, then the plane is naturally like this. The tail is kind of dragging in the air. So to fly straight and level, we're gonna have to overcompensate by flying like this to fly straight. We're gonna have a better fuel economy because we are flying through the air like this. We are less prone to stalling because we're pitched in a position or an attitude like this. But if we did happen to stall and the nose fell, since our tail is heavy, it's going to naturally want to put us like this, meaning we're susceptible to stalling over and over and over again. So if you think about it, the nose is pitching up, we stall, so the nose falls, and then almost immediately our tail is heavier, so it pulls it back down, and then immediately we're stalling again, and then it's stalling again. So it's just harder to recover from a stall. So the last thing that we're going to talk about for this lesson is left turning tendencies. There might be some things that I didn't go over that I had written up here, but this video is getting a bit long. So we're just going to go into our left turning tendencies, and that's going to be the end of this video. But there's 4 types of left turning tendencies: P factor, torque, gyro, scopic, precession, spiraling, slipstream. P factor. This has to do with our propellers. So just remember that it's called P factor. So just think propeller factor. Basically, we have one propeller and it moves in one direction. Our blades of our propeller are at an angle. The best way that I can't really explain it to you, but if you go and look at a plane's propeller, you'll see that each blade, so these are our blades of our propeller, each blade is almost twisted in a way that it's curved so that it kind of cups the air and really takes a big bite out of the air as it's turning. So as our propeller is spinning, obviously one blade is going to be descending as one blade is ascending. So as this blade is descending and this blade is ascending, this blade has a higher angle of attack. And a higher angle of attack produces more lift. This blade has a lower angle of attack, so it has less lift. This produces more thrust on the right side, which then makes the nose of the airplane, so say this is the nose of the airplane, makes the nose want to go to the left. Before I go any deeper into all the different types of left turning tendencies, our plane naturally wants to turn to the left, so it's because of all of these things. We have rudders in the plane, which is what you use your feet, and that controls the yaw of the plane. The plane is naturally going to want to fly like this, and our pedals is what controls this movement of the plane. So as our plane wants to turn to the left, we push on our right rudder to kind of straighten that plane out for straight and level flight. So you're going to hear it a lot when you start flying, but your instructor is going to tell you to always use more right rudder, especially on takeoff. But yeah, Next is torque, which also has to do with the spinning of the propeller, but I feel like torque is much more simple than P factor. So we have our propeller, and if we're sitting inside the cockpit, our propeller turns clockwise, so to the right. So as our propeller is turning this way, our propeller is spinning rapidly to the right, our plane is naturally going to want to turn to the left. Gyroscopic precession is where it gets a little bit confusing, so let me try to break this down for you. With a gyro, the force that is applied to the gyro is felt 90 degrees ahead of the direction that it's spinning in. So a propeller is spinning to the right. If a force is applied to this wing, it's going to be felt down here. So the force that is applied here is actually felt 90 degrees ahead in the direction that the propeller is turning, causing the plane to want to turn to the left because the force is being felt 90 degrees to the left of where it was applied. If that makes sense. That's the very basic way of explaining it. Spiraling slipstream is the easiest one for me to understand. So I'm just going to kind of draw. So we have a propeller up here, and as the propeller is rotating, it's sending air backwards off of the propeller blades. So we're getting some backwash off the propeller blades, and as it is coming off, it's spiraling around the fuselage of the aircraft, which is just like the body of the aircraft. It's moving over top of the plane, and then it's kind of coming underneath, and then it's moving in this motion. So just picture the airplane, a big spiral of air is just moving around the whole airplane. And because of the direction the propeller spins, the air is moving around, and it's going to end up hitting our tail in this direction, meaning our tail is going to move to the right, meaning our nose is going to move to the left. So as this air comes around our airplane, it's going to come here, hit us in the tail, pushing our tail to the right, and then pushing our nose to the left. And that's our last left turning tendency. That is the basis of aerodynamics. There's probably some things I'm leaving out. There's little nitty gritty details that you can go further into studying, but just for the basics, that was probably enough. So today is Monday. I'm going to post Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So my next video will be posted on Wednesday. Hope that was helpful. You guys should subscribe, like, comment what you guys want to see, because I actually want to take this YouTube channel seriously, and it's actually very helpful as a pilot to constantly reteach and learn things, and this is very helpful for me because I have to go back and learn the lesson myself, take notes on it, and then reteach it to you guys, and it really helps it stick in my brain. So I'm really excited about this YouTube channel, so comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you on Wednesday.